Do you think a powerful millionaire woman could truly be changed by a poor single dad? On a stormy night in Chicago, the city lights blurred through heavy rain as a sleek electric car skidded out of control and slammed into a guardrail. Inside was Olivia Carter, a 32-year-old millionaire CEO known for her brilliance and icy composure. She had everything: wealth, influence, and the love of her life by her side, or so she thought. What Olivia didn't know was that the very man she trusted most, her CFO and boyfriend, was preparing the cruelest betrayal of all. Trapped in twisted metal, unconscious and alone, Olivia's fate didn't rest in her riches or power. It rested in the hands of David, a struggling single father walking home from his night shift, who had nothing to give but courage. If you believe kindness can bridge any divide, drop a Y below. David Miller was 35 years old, and life had not been kind to him. Once a promising mechanic, he now worked as a night security guard at a warehouse on the edge of Chicago. Every evening, when the city pulsed with neon lights and the rush of wealth downtown, David clocked in with a faded uniform and a thermos of coffee that had long since lost its warmth. His paycheck was barely enough to cover rent for their small one-bedroom apartment and the second-hand clothes his 8-year-old daughter Emily needed for school. Yet, despite the constant struggle, David carried himself with quiet dignity. Emily was his world, the reason he pushed through exhaustion every day. Their nightly rituals, sharing instant noodles at the kitchen table, watching cartoons until she drifted off to sleep, were humble, but filled with love. On the other side of the city lived Olivia Carter, a 32-year-old self-made millionaire. As CEO of Carter Innovations, a rapidly growing tech firm specializing in clean energy, she was hailed as one of Chicago's most powerful young executives. Her downtown penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan, filled with marble floors, designer furniture, and a view that made her look untouchable. In public, she exuded confidence, sharp suits, measured words, and a reputation for crushing competition with ruthless efficiency. Magazines called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Avenue. Behind closed doors, however, her life was far more fragile than anyone imagined. Olivia's heart belonged to Victor Hale, her company's CFO and longtime boyfriend. To her, Victor was stability in a world where trust was rare. He was charming, well-spoken, and ambitious, often standing beside her at galas and investor meetings. Olivia believed he was her partner not only in business but in life. She ignored the whispers of colleagues who hinted that Victor's hunger for power was greater than his affection for her. To Olivia, love blinded her from the shadows Victor cast. Their two worlds, David's life of scraping by and Olivia's empire of wealth, were never meant to intersect. David walked to work through cracked sidewalks, avoiding the glare of luxury billboards advertising lifestyles he could never afford. Olivia was the face of those billboards, photographed in gowns that cost more than David earned in 6 months. He fixed broken locks. She closed multi-million-dollar deals. He lived paycheck to paycheck. She negotiated with senators. And yet, fate had its own design. On that rainy night, while David trudged home through puddles with sore feet and Emily's lunchbox tucked under his arm, Olivia was leaving a high-profile charity dinner. She was exhausted, her electric car gliding silently along the slick highway. Her thoughts wandered between quarterly reports and Victor's reassuring smile. She had no idea that her life, so carefully built on wealth, status, and love, was about to shatter in seconds. The crash of metal against the guardrail was sudden and violent. Sparks flew, smoke hissed from the battery pack beneath the car, and the rain beat down mercilessly. Olivia slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious, her seatbelt trapping her in place. No chauffeur, no bodyguard, no Victor, just the storm and the darkness. Blocks away, David heard the screech and saw the plume of smoke. His instincts told him to run, though his mind screamed to stay away from the danger. He had Emily waiting at home, he had no insurance, no safety net, but his heart, the same heart that had endured grief and hardship, could not ignore a life in peril. Two worlds, separated by wealth, status, and circumstance, were about to collide in the most unlikely way. The electric car hissed and crackled, smoke curling upward from its shattered frame. Rain hammered the asphalt, turning every spark into a sinister flash of light. Inside, Olivia Carter was motionless, her head leaning against the airbag, trapped by the crumpled metal of the driver's side door. The once pristine symbol of her wealth and status had become a coffin, waiting to ignite. David froze for a heartbeat when he reached the scene. He had read enough news stories about lithium battery fires to know the risk. One wrong move and the car could explode. His hands trembled as he thought of Emily's face, waiting for him at home. No one would blame him if he turned and ran. But as he stared at the woman trapped inside, gasping faintly for air, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Hang on!" he shouted, though Olivia was unconscious and could not hear him. He pulled at the twisted handle, burning his palm on hot metal. The door wouldn't budge. Rainwater mixed with the blood dripping from a cut on his arm as he braced himself, wedged his foot against the frame, and yanked with all his strength. With a screech of tortured steel, the door gave way. David reached in, unbuckled Olivia's seatbelt, and dragged her out just as flames licked along the edge of the hood. He staggered backward, cradling her in his arms, coughing from the acrid smoke. Within seconds, the battery erupted in a burst of fire that lit up the night. If he had hesitated a moment longer, she would have died. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as David laid her gently on the wet pavement. Olivia stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Through blurred vision, she saw the face of a stranger, drenched, exhausted, eyes filled with a kind of desperate determination she had never seen at her galas or boardrooms. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice cracked. David only nodded, shielding her from the rain with his jacket until the ambulance pulled up. Paramedics rushed forward, pushing him aside as they lifted her onto a stretcher. He stood there, chest heaving, his clothes soaked, watching as they drove her away. No one asked for his name. No one cared that without him, Olivia Carter would have been a headline of tragedy instead of survival. The next morning, the news broke about Olivia's accident. Media outlets covered the story with glossy headlines. "Millionaire CEO survives electric car crash." But there was no mention of the nameless man who had pulled her from the wreckage. Behind the scenes, Victor Hale made sure of that. As CFO, and as her boyfriend, he handled press statements personally. To him, acknowledging a poor stranger's role didn't fit the image he wanted for Olivia or for himself. "Better to keep it clean," he told her, brushing her hand in the hospital room. "You don't need the world to know you were saved by some nobody." Olivia, still shaken and bruised, wanted to argue, but the weight of his words pressed down on her. For years, she had trusted Victor to protect her reputation. Yet as she closed her eyes, all she could see was the stranger's face in the rain, his courage, his raw humanity. And a tiny voice whispered inside her, "Maybe I owe him more than my life." But Olivia didn't know the full truth. Victor wasn't protecting her. He was protecting himself, covering tracks of betrayal she had not yet discovered. If you believe a single act of courage can turn the world of power upside down, drop a Y in the comments. 2 weeks after the crash, Olivia returned to Carter Innovations. The bruises on her face had faded, but the weight of that night clung to her like smoke. She sat at the head of the glass-walled conference room, reviewing quarterly numbers. But her mind wandered. She couldn't shake the memory of rain, fire, and the stranger who carried her from death. Victor noticed her distraction. "You're still tired," he said smoothly, sliding a hand onto hers. "Don't worry, I've got everything under control." His smile was polished, perfect for the cameras, but Olivia caught a flicker in his eyes she couldn't name. She forced a nod, trusting him as she always had. That afternoon, while walking through the lobby, Olivia's gaze froze. There he was, David Miller. Dressed in the navy uniform of a temporary security hire, he stood near the revolving doors, greeting employees with quiet politeness. For a moment, Olivia forgot how to breathe. He wasn't supposed to be here. In her world of polished steel and billion-dollar deals, their eyes met. David gave a small, respectful nod, as if he wasn't the man who had pulled her from fire. She approached, heart racing, but before she could speak, Victor appeared at her side. "Why is he here?" Victor hissed once they were out of earshot. "We don't need strays hanging around. Do you know his background? People like him?" His words trailed with disdain. Olivia frowned. He saved my life, Victor. And that's commendable, Victor replied, his tone syrupy. But gratitude doesn't mean you bring him into the heart of the company. He's beneath this world. Olivia didn't answer, but the comment lingered like poison. That night, she found herself replaying the moment David stood in the rain, risking everything. He hadn't asked for recognition, money, or even thanks. He had simply acted. That kind of courage was rarer than all the deals she had ever signed. Meanwhile, David kept his distance. The job was temporary. 2 weeks of filling in for a sick guard. He didn't want to complicate things. Still, he noticed how tired Olivia looked. How often she sat alone in her office after hours, staring out at the skyline as if the city lights could comfort her. One evening, as David finished his shift, he saw Olivia in the lobby, struggling with an armful of files. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "Let me help you." She hesitated, pride tugging against gratitude, but finally handed him a stack. "Thank you," she said softly, almost surprised at the relief in her voice. For a moment they walked side by side, a millionaire CEO and a single father in a faded uniform, and the silence between them felt strangely honest. But upstairs, Victor was plotting. He had discovered a way to manipulate Carter Innovations' finances, shifting assets into shell accounts under his control. He told himself it was only business, a strategy to secure his future. Yet a darker part of him simmered with envy. He saw the way Olivia's eyes softened when she looked at David, and it infuriated him. Late that night, Victor stood in his office, staring at the city below. "She's mine," he whispered to his reflection in the glass. "The company, the fortune, even her loyalty. It all belongs to me, and no security guard is going to take that away." What Olivia didn't know was that the man she trusted most was laying the foundation of her downfall, and the man she least expected, the poor single dad who risked everything, was quietly becoming her anchor. The night of the Carter Innovations Gala was meant to be a celebration. Investors, board members, and journalists gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne while Olivia delivered a speech about the company's bright future. Cameras flashed as Victor stood proudly at her side, his arm draped around her waist like the perfect partner. To everyone in the room, they were the golden couple, powerful, unstoppable. But behind Victor's charming smile lurked a carefully constructed plan. He had spent months shifting assets, falsifying reports, and gaining the quiet allegiance of key board members. The gala was not just a party, it was the stage for his takeover. When the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed into laughter and clinking glasses, Victor guided Olivia into a private lounge upstairs. The lights were dim, the air heavy with the scent of polished leather and whiskey. "Victor, what's going on?" she asked, sensing the tension in his grip. He closed the door and turned, his expression darkening. "You've had your reign, Olivia, but it's over. The board is already siding with me. By tomorrow, Carter Innovations won't be yours." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about? This company, this was my life. I built it. And I'm finishing it," he snapped. "Sign these transfer papers or everything you've worked for will burn. You'll be ruined." He tossed a folder onto the table, papers spilling like knives across the wood. Olivia's hands shook. "Victor, you're supposed to be the man I can trust." He leaned closer, his voice low and cruel. "I was never your partner, Olivia. You were just a stepping stone. Did you really think love mattered to me?" Her chest constricted, the truth slicing deeper than any financial loss. The man she called the love of her life was nothing more than a predator. Before she could respond, the door burst open. "Step away from her." Victor spun around. David stood in the doorway, his uniform slightly rumpled, eyes blazing with resolve. He had overheard enough of Victor's threats while making rounds that night to know Olivia was in danger. Victor laughed coldly. "You? You're a guard, a charity case. This is none of your business." David stepped forward, fists clenched. "You made it my business the moment you threatened her." Victor's sneer twisted into rage. He lunged, shoving David against the wall. For a moment, their struggle was uneven. Victor, fueled by arrogance and desperation, against David, hardened by years of labor and survival. But David's strength came not from ambition, but from something far deeper: the will to protect. With a surge of effort, David shoved him back, sending the CFO sprawling across the table. Papers flew into the air like broken promises. "Olivia, get out of here!" David shouted, but Olivia didn't move. She stood frozen, watching the two men clash, the one who betrayed her with lies, and the one who had saved her life without asking for anything in return. Security rushed in moments later, alerted by the commotion. They found Victor pinned to the ground, David holding him there with steady, unyielding force. The mask had finally slipped from Victor's face, exposing his treachery to everyone who mattered. As Victor was dragged away, screaming about power and betrayal, Olivia turned to David. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "You saved me. Again." And in that moment, surrounded by chaos and shattered illusions, she realized that the man she had once overlooked, the poor single dad who asked for nothing, was the only one who had ever truly been there for her. The fallout from Victor's betrayal rippled through Carter Innovations like an earthquake. Within 24 hours, the board convened an emergency meeting. Evidence of his embezzlement, uncovered in the flurry of documents scattered during the struggle, left no room for denial. Investors who had once toasted him turned cold, their faith evaporating under the weight of fraud. Victor Hale was swiftly removed from his position, his arrest making headlines across Chicago. The man who had sought to seize an empire now sat in a cell, his ambitions turned to ash. For Olivia, the collapse of trust was devastating, yet strangely liberating. She stood before her employees days later, her voice steadier than it had been in months. "Carter Innovations will endure," she declared, "not because of one person, but because of integrity, resilience, and the truth." Applause echoed through the atrium, but behind her composed exterior, her mind drifted back to the man who had made those words possible. David returned quietly to his modest life after the confrontation, reluctant to step into the spotlight. For him, saving Olivia had never been about recognition. It was about doing what was right. Yet his absence left a silence Olivia couldn't ignore. She found herself searching lobbies and parking garages, hoping to glimpse him again. For the first time, the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan felt unbearably empty. One evening, determined, Olivia asked her assistant to track him down. She arrived unannounced at David's apartment, a weathered brick building with peeling paint and a flickering hallway light. Emily answered the door, her wide eyes blinking up at the elegant woman holding a bouquet of daisies. "Hi, sweetie," Olivia said softly, crouching to Emily's level. "Is your dad home?" David appeared moments later, caught off guard, still in his work shirt, exhaustion etched into his features. "Ms. Carter?" he asked, bewildered. She smiled faintly. "Olivia. Please call me Olivia." The evening unfolded simply. Takeout containers on the kitchen table, laughter from Emily as Olivia clumsily joined their game of charades, and a warmth that money could never buy. Olivia found herself enchanted not by wealth or power, but by the way David listened when Emily spoke, the way he laughed despite the weight of his struggles, the way love filled every corner of their small apartment. "This is what I never had," Olivia admitted quietly when Emily went to bed. "A family, not investors, not headlines. Just love." David looked at her cautious. "Olivia, your world and mine, they don't mix. You don't owe me anything." Her eyes glistened. "I know. But maybe I don't want our worlds to stay separate anymore." From that night, a change began. Olivia still commanded boardrooms, but she also found herself in David's world, cheering at Emily's school play, eating spaghetti in mismatched bowls, laughing at jokes that had nothing to do with mergers or markets. She discovered joy not in the grandeur of her penthouse, but in the simplicity of shared moments. For David, the shift was humbling. He never sought to step into Olivia's spotlight, yet he could not deny the bond growing between them. He had rescued her twice from disaster, but in truth, she had rescued him too, from the quiet loneliness of survival without connection. Together they built something fragile but real. A bridge between wealth and struggle, between power and humility, between a millionaire woman who had lost faith in love, and a single dad who proved love was never lost at all. Wealth can buy penthouses, power, and prestige, but it cannot buy the kind of courage that pulls someone from a burning car, nor the kind of love that makes a child's laughter feel more valuable than gold. Olivia Carter once believed her empire and her partner defined her worth. But in the end, it was a poor single father, armed with nothing but integrity and heart, who showed her what true wealth really meant. Life's greatest treasures are often found in the most unlikely places, in sacrifice, in honesty, and in love that asks for nothing in return. David had little by the world's standards, yet he gave everything that mattered. And in doing so, he forever changed the life of a woman who thought she already had it all. If you believe kindness can cross every boundary and change even the richest hearts, drop a Y below.